Hi guys, great to see you. I'd like to first of all thank the guys for joining us on a weekly basis. This is a great call. I think really value your contributions. I think the focus right now is around making money, which is becoming a bit of a misnomer, and we've got a series of 3 talks to try and get the show back on the road. The whole purpose of this is to try and make sense of what's emerging now and the sort of actions that we should be taking in a fairly open and honest way. What's interesting as well, I think, is that in difficult times, action becomes misaligned versus the challenge. So we'll touch on that. That's oddly enough our experience from our background and experience. Our credibility comes from the learning from 200 company turnarounds. So we'll touch on some of the points there. I'm delighted that Hans Manku is going to, well, he's joining us today, and he's going to share his thoughts on his tech startup called Arrive.com, which no doubt he'll touch on specifically, and how some tech products are having shorter lifespans, how that impacts customers, and how that affects the supply chain and the way of working, particularly with the theme of challenging our notion of the jazz band, which is this group of people that adjusts on the job to suit the challenge. So just to recap some of the points that we've picked up from previous pubs, really around intimacy with each other, reconnection with each other, both at family level but also locally. That's also the basis of profits, company profits, which we've been flagging up. There's also been some fairly significant buying shifts which need to be acknowledged, which we'll touch on. And doing the right thing. There isn't much space for sort of breaking the rules at the moment. I think there's a lot of visibility on that. So I think we've noticed that survival takes very much depends on taking new action. The challenge is what sort of new actions are those. So that's really the sort of theme for today. So Hans is going to speak, then Ton will speak, share his thoughts. I'll share some thoughts, and if at any stage anybody's got any questions, then please fire away, and David will pick up the questions. We'll cover those off as we're going through. So fantastic to have you with us, Hans. Really looking forward to what you've got to say, and over to you.
Thank you, Tom. Nice to speak with all you guys at the pub today. Usually I have a pint in my hand when I'm in a pub, but hey, I should have been better prepared. So I think you mentioned that the theme of the orchestra versus the jazz band, which is something that I think is very current and very relevant. We're starting to see a lot of things that support this sort of thesis and position. I think the most telling stat that underlines this is that 50% of companies' revenues come from products that are under 3 years old, which to me was, a wow moment. The traditional model for business was that you have a cash cow and you make money from it for decades and decades. Whereas now that isn't the case. And so I think what that in turn points towards is how people and their needs and desires as customers don't stay still, and they're constantly iterating and evolving, and I think that's driven through a couple of different channels. So first of all, we're in the information age. Innovation goes from conception to being proven to then being made available and accessible, or at least to achieve awareness so much quicker than they ever were before. Through so many different networks, you can find out on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, but also as well, there's so many credible publications, online publications now, where all of these things are not only able to be spoken about, but able to be demonstrated with video and everything else. So I think consumers are now being shown or can see so much more of the possibilities that they can have, and as a consequence want more of that. And this in turn means these legacy products, as I mentioned before, just are no longer becoming desirable. Now, in terms of my thoughts on how this kind of fits into the jazz band is, ultimately, if you're playing a type of music and the crowd don't want to listen to it anymore, what do? You change the tune, right? And I think that's something that businesses really need to have a focus on. And of course, we've got this concept of agile, which is bandied about by a lot of businesses, but done well by very few. But I think it's becoming absolutely essential that companies do adopt agile and which crosses over with design thinking, because the second that you lose a connection with your customers, things are moving so quickly that you find the products that you're now putting into your various different channels are no longer what they want. So I think what you've started to see, and I think with myself having a tech background, I've noticed a lot that products are littered with native and also embedded features that are consistently taking the pulse of their customer. What do they like? Do they like this? How do you feel about this? A consistent and continuous conversation between company and customer. And it's kind of a bit like someone in the crowd asking the audience, do you like what we take requests? A bit like a jukebox almost. Hey, what do you guys want to hear? Well, that's what we will provide. And I think for myself, I've tried to implement this in Arrive in a number of different ways. I think it starts firstly with the preparation of the business. So we've made our business very modular, very malleable, because we are, as I mentioned, consistently taking the pulse of what our people like to want from a service like ours. And then I think going back to sort of like the jukebox analogy, giving them the choice. You can never achieve better product market fit than if you have a customized bespoke offering. How can anyone be mad if I give you exactly what you ask for? So if you want to listen to this song, I'll play you this song. If you want this type of product, I can provide you this type of product. So I think, the jazz band analogy is great for current business and also the business of tomorrow, because as all the models suggest, empathizing with your customer and building what they need as opposed to what you think that they need is just a surefire way to make some profit.
That's fantastic. Thanks, Hans. I think what's interesting about what you just said is, even a relatively small business, you've reflected the professionalism I think that it requires to run these sorts of organisations, which I think is absolutely critical now. I think a question for you in terms of keeping in tune with the audience. What do you think the key actions that you've taken in terms of really understanding and staying in tune with what the audience are actually looking for? What are the actions you've noticed work best?
So it's an interesting question actually, because the audience, when you're in a regulated market like a lot of us, sometimes the music that you can even play has to fit within a policy. And for ourselves, our policy is partly moderated by TfL, and there's been some huge legislative changes which may have flown under the radar for the common public, but in private hire, they've been quite seismic. So going forward, Sadiq Khan has said that effectively his legacy piece is to improve air quality in London. And he's targeted the big polluters, one of them being private hire. So now, no cars that are not zero emission capable will be licensed for private hire. And that's meant that obviously we can see the lifespan of all the Priuses that you see littered around London. Effectively, they're on their way out. So that was one of the things that kind of determined the policy, so to speak, of our business. So we realized we had to be agile enough to kind of get out ahead of this new regulation, and we also looked at why that regulation has come into play, because legislation is typically a reflection of the public's morals and principles. So it opened our eyes a lot to the fact that, okay, this is important to Sadiq Khan because it's important to his constituents. And his constituents and my customers just happen to be the same people, right? So we understood that, it's absolutely necessary to be zero emission, not just from a legislative perspective, but from a market fit perspective. And so of course we've done everything we can to pivot towards a zero emission fleet. In terms of other ways that we've tried to get out ahead of trends, in addition to observing legislation, we obviously engage with and speak to both our drivers and our passengers, or should I say our passengers and our drivers, because what typically happens is people think of ride-hailing applications as purely serving passengers, but that isn't the case. We're a two-sided marketplace, and we need to ensure that both participants are comfortable and well served. And it's with these feedback sessions. It's with occasionally they can be one-to-one. I speak often with drivers especially, but also with customers. Follow up with new customers with regards to how they feel about the service, what they like and what they don't like, because all of this for us is feedback that either validates our positioning or tells us where we can get stronger. We have obviously some built-in programmatic mechanisms to take the sentiment, the market sentiment, so to speak. But if I'm honest, nothing can kind of quite replicate a conversation. Ratings people are a little bit desensitized to ratings, specifically the process, where it becomes a bit of a it's just lost its meaning. Once you've seen something a million times, the million and first time it's not quite as powerful. So yeah, we try to copy both of them to first get scale from the programmatic solution, but to get depth from the actual conversations as well.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you. That's very insightful. I think it's almost like the 5-star rating is boring, isn't it? And actually, it'd be probably more interesting if you had a 1-star rating. When it comes to, anyway, I exaggerate slightly to make the point.
No, but it's a very good point, because a 5-star rating is essentially this is the cream of the crop. Every single expectation. In fact, my expectations were surpassed. But I think because businesses are not doing enough to act on the negative ratings or any ratings, full stop. Yeah, it's almost much of a muchness. I think when the customer starts to feel, wow, okay, this rating actually has some weight. Like I'll tell you who have got it really, really right. TripAdvisor. Right. People don't just give out 5-star ratings on TripAdvisor just like that. They have to have a good experience, and they're very happy to put a 2, 3, or a 4. If they're happy but not delighted. Yeah,
great. Thank you. What about actually making money? How are you ascertaining your pricing? How are you sort of pitching your price point?
So I think in my market, the problem with making money is everyone wants to give their customers a free ride, and there's no pun intended. The user acquisition models, I believe, are purely for a lot for vanity metrics, and I think that these businesses have been built up to sell a business as opposed to sell a product, because they're two, of course, very different things. You can make a ton of money selling a business, of course, but you need to selling a business, but you need to sell a product first to make your business sellable in the first place.
Yeah.
And I think Silicon Valley and specifically all of the larger legacy businesses that are struggling to weather this sort of technical transition have created a market for people to just sell their business, whether it's profitable or not. And what I mean by that is, in my industry, in automotive, the big OEMs are struggling to really stay abreast of how smartphone and mobile technology is completely changing how people want to interact with their cars.
Yeah.
Tesla have got it right, and they're the most valuable business, the most valuable car business in the world now, because they have dovetailed not just the car, or they've dovetailed the car and the phone together, so it becomes almost seamless. It's not just because they're zero emission cars, because if that was the case, then Hyundai would be challenging them, as well as all of the other companies that have invested a lot into an electric powertrain. So yeah, I think that what these businesses are starting to do is they just want to buy a business to solve a problem, and then therefore young companies like ourselves are geared towards set ourselves up to solve a problem for a larger business, so we get swallowed up, instead of create a business that solves a problem for customers so we can make profit, become sustainable, and then hey, maybe we do get bought, but that becomes a bonus rather than the ultimate aim. Yeah,
that's great. Thank you very much. And you've introduced a sort of refinement to the jazz band, which is the jukebox, which is interesting because I think the challenge with a digital business is you need to a degree commoditize your products, to have something that you can specifically buy. How do you sort of square that circle in terms of bespoke versus jukebox? How do you have that edge in terms of adding value rather than just playing tunes on a jukebox?
So we've actually completely decommoditized ride-hailing in that. So Uber and the other ride-hailing applications, they have effectively homogenized the service. So they tell customers the experience that you get is the same no matter whose car you get into, and that's completely not the case. There are some drivers who invest heavily in making their car an environment that is nice to be in, and there's some who don't. And you can tell. And for those 20 minutes that you're in the car, you could have your head out of the window just trying to get some fresh air. Whereas in the cars that are a bit more pleasant, you're able to actually get on with what you're doing. There are some drivers on our platform who have Wi-Fi in their car that enable passengers to work on their laptop whilst they're driving. Some drivers who have TVs. Beyond that, there's the onboarding and the offboarding process, where some drivers will help passengers with heavy luggage. I mean, there's a plethora of different different kind of additional services that our drivers that are visible if our drivers do offer them. Right. And so that's kind of like why decommoditization has been super powerful for us, because commoditization is exactly what everyone else has done, and that's why you get diminishing margins, unprofitability, having to heavily subsidize users just to use your product, and also on the flip side of that, having to heavily subsidize drivers to undertake the work. And what I mean by that is because you can only really, when you commoditize, you can only really differentiate on a few things, mainly price and ETA. And because you have to keep price so tight, drivers aren't motivated or incentivized to do the work. So not only are you having to give the user £10 to sign up to your platform and actually transact, you then actually have to give the driver money to do the work in addition to what the fare is, because it's not incentivizing for him. I mean, Uber's S1, they had to disclose how much they had to pay to drivers by way of trip incentives. It was $3.5 billion. $3.5 billion. So that's the contribution they had to make to drivers to do the work that their customers were taking, and it's insane.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. Thank you. I think it's about I think that's the increasing challenge, isn't it? Trying to manage the respective stakeholders and add value in that supply chain. But I think, Hans, that's fantastic. So I'll just hand over to Tom now to share his thoughts, and you're welcome to to contribute any questions as we're going through this. So thank you very much. It's really clear. Tom, what are your thoughts? What are you thinking?
Yeah, I made a couple of observations here. First of all, I must say that I will be very pleased if I'm able to make use of that product, because what's not to like about ordering a ride with a type of a driver, type of a car, type of service that I actually want, rather than just it being just a surprise of what I will get, right? So I like that bespoke element a lot. Just a few things that I thought were interesting here, because we have had a conversation a couple of times in this platform, talking about tech and whether tech would be a solution or actually even a problem, or just a money burning platform. But the way Hans is describing his perspective for tech is that it's actually an enabler to understand the customer better. So create that intimacy that we actually would like to have with our customers, and then be able, to offer, whether it's from the jukebox or from another stack of concepts, to be able to do exactly that what the consumer likes, and then obviously tech becomes a fantastic tool to increase businesses their profitability. Whereas if you use it just to use it as a commodity, and you have to give it away, or you have to even invest 3.5 billion to people that make use of your product, then obviously it is definitely not the solution, I would say. The other thing that I liked, what I've missed also over the last few months, is if there's certain legislation, people use it, people abide by the rules, obviously, and apparently that's the same in the business that Hans is in. But he then still asks, why is this legislation there? What is the purpose of the legislation? Why does the public actually want this? Is this reflection of what consumers and public, or voters, if you like, if you're in politics, think? And I think that is very important. We have seen people making use of the furlough schedule. We've seen, but actually not doing anything other with that. Just saying, okay, there is now a furlough schedule, so let's actually not do anything for the next 3-4 months, rather than taking a piece of legislation of whatever is on offer from government and say, okay, why is it there? What will happen with it? How can it evolve? And how can I really make use of that within my particular business? So these were just a few first observations based on those comments that Hans made earlier.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks very much, Tom. I think, I'd add a few things. I think I've got 5 case studies, 2 of which Starling and Revolut, but 3 other businesses which are pretty well known. 3 other businesses I've spoken to or engaged with recently. And the one that stands out in terms of the potential unicorn is the one with a compelling product, and it isn't Revolut or Starling. And interesting enough, the revenue models of Starling and Revolut are not aligned with their core business. So what you've just reflected, Hans, is profitability aligned with your core business, which is bang on the money. I think the danger is, if you haven't got that, then you've got, in the case of Starling, which is heavily dependent on interest, right, as income. So they were planning to get to a certain amount of money in the bank to generate the income from interest. Think about that in the current climate, basing a revenue model on interest. It doesn't reflect the value they're offering to customers, when in fact they've got quite a sophisticated business model. So that's a few comments, I think, in relation to valuations. I think in terms of, we'll just talk about winning thinking. We've done quite a few implementations with clients. I mean, an awful lot. We've trained first tier, I don't know, a lot of clients, but second tier, probably 10,000 people have got some flavour of winning thinking. And the good thing about that is we don't have a huge engine behind it, which is something we can turn on and off. So in terms of the business model, it's like our secret weapon, but actually there's not a huge overhead structure that sits behind it. And I think it's about, almost mothballing certain things. Not that I have any intention to mothball winning thinking, but it's an option should we wish to. There's no cost. So it's a pretty simple, maybe parallel. I think the other thing is, the sanity of these business models. And you talked about sale to a trade sale. A lot of people are gearing up to trade sales. In fact, that's very much the most likely outcome. Because virtually no startups have got any chance of competing with the FANGs, because Price's law says you've got more chance of about 1 times 10 to the minus 48, right? Which is more than equal to 0 of chance. So that the trade sale is very much the most likely outcome. But the challenge is, if what's the valuation of businesses if they're not making profit, and also how do you make sense of a business that's not making profit? I think that's a real challenge for a lot of companies like Revolut who are not charging any money. And that's notwithstanding if a competitor comes onto the market and if Revolut start to charge money, another competitor comes in and charges nothing. How do you compete with that? And where's the sense in that madness? So, and interesting enough, I think an interesting check again in terms of Revolut of their relationships is that average customer has only got £357 in the bank, so it doesn't reflect a whole lot of trust.
Oh wow!
So I think there's some interesting perspectives there. In terms of jazz bands, I think there's some things to add to things we've already been talking about. I think if our thoughts are not challenged, they become facts, right? So I think one of the challenges for people like ourselves when we're doing or jazz banding is to very much challenge our thinking. And I think relationships are absolutely critical. So you talked a lot about relationships and how to manage relationships. And I think, you've only got to look at the local sort of digital service, the war that goes on in terms of the polarized positioning. There's a real challenge with relationships. And I think what that gives rise to, without wishing to steal David's thunder, is a filled stress bucket. And when you've got a filled stress bucket, then you do no thinking. And I think that's a difficult situation. And Tom rightly flagged up the pret-a-manger thing, which some of their clients they've actually offered a service 5 coffees a day for 20 quid a month or something like that, which is wrecking their own market. So, and this is actually some of the thinking behind it, which is sort of a fear of losing market share and around growth and domination thinking rather than profit and relationships. So you've heavily focused on the drivers of profit around relationship and bespoke service. That's just quite a typical action that shows no thinking, and it's obviously trashing the market. So you talked a bit about the short life cycle of products. For sure, you're going to have a short life cycle of that product if you're not careful, and that's a cup of coffee. So I think there's a real danger that we do create races to the bottom and have the confidence to stick to our guns, maintain pricing even when competition appears on the marketplace, because quite frankly, if you don't maintain your pricing, then how are you proving that somebody wants your product? So I think what I'd say to this is it's vital to invest in relationships, and this is one of the things that we do as Winning Thinking to stay in a level playing field. So in terms of reducing the stress bucket, managing relationships is really important, and getting back to the way we communicate with each other internally in the jazz band, externally with clients. Or there's some pretty nasty implications, I think, of this less thinking, less visibility of what clients are doing, more pret-a-manger deals. And I think the last thing I'd say is if the business proposition isn't compelling, which is David Allen's favourite excellent challenge, who's a US tech guy that has been on the pub quite a bit, good friend of the pub, then there's a good chance you should stop selling your product and stop wasting people's money. So that would be my my thoughts, in support of what you just said, Hans.
Yeah, I mean, I think some really some good points there. And one of the things that I wanted to touch on is your ability to discuss the importance of persisting with pricing. Now, what typically happens is, I think the only reason why companies don't persist with pricing is because it's not justified. And I think that speaks a lot about the value of the product itself relative to its competitors. You would simply only reduce your prices and reduce your revenue and effectively squeeze your own business if you had no other option. And I think with, using the Pret example, I guess their coffee isn't as good as it is at Joe and the Juice, or any of these other places, because otherwise they would compete on the flavor of the coffee or on, the actual quality of their product.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was an interesting point that you mentioned about companies not choosing to persist with pricing.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you for that. I think one of the things we test is when we're doing the work is what was the challenge and what was the response. So there was some challenge there, right? And then you listen to their thinking, and then you get to actually why did they trash the market with their 20 quid deal. And then you can actually address the right problem. Unless you actually address the thinking, unfortunately, it goes nowhere. So that's a sort of example of the EQ fixing the EQ fixes the right problem, and the IQ fixes the problem. Yeah. So that's, in terms of staying on target, that's what really matters. If you try and batter at it in the usual old way, quoting the financials and all this sort of stuff, you'll find you go nowhere, or at best it will take forever, or at worst they'll go back to doing what they're doing before, unless you actually can shine a light on actually fixing the right issue.
Absolutely.
So brilliant. So this has been really quite a succinct call. I'm really actually, it's been very interesting today. I don't know, is there anything else, Hans, that you'd like to share that we haven't talked about?
I think off the top of my head, unless you guys have any questions for me,
No.
That you'd like me to clarify.
Great.
I've covered the kind of the major.
Yeah, no, I think it's true. I think it's good. I think it's really great. So, David McLean, have we got any questions from the guys?
No, there's no questions at
Excellent.
the moment. But please, audience, ask any questions if you like, while I just give a couple of minutes here. And thank you, Hans. Really appreciate what you said there. The pricing and the correct products that we've been talking about in this jazz band analogy, and the fear, lack of confidence, courage to do it or not. And I really like what you said about flexibility and agility as well. And I always like to kind of, from the human point of view, behavioural point of view, what does that really mean? Have you got the confidence to stand out? I'm agreeing with you. Well, I very much think you do, Hans. It's great to see. Belief in what you're doing. Belief's absolutely key. Belief that you're going to be successful. Do you have the correct thinking, the rational and clear thinking, which Tom was talking about there in terms of the stress bucket. When the stress bucket is overflowing, when fear is there in terms of any businesses that are in trouble, then you don't have that clear thinking. You don't have that confidence within yourself. And because the position that many businesses are in, of course, as we know, that they don't have that clear thinking at the moment, and it can be extremely damaging to their profits and potentially to their business as well. The one key thing I'd just like to leave with the viewers and the listeners is the vital importance of belief. The clinical work that I've done for years and years, it underpins everything. The belief in oneself, the belief in your products, your ability, the belief in your business, your belief in your ability to change. And there's a saying that goes, a belief is only a thought that you keep thinking. We tend to think that the beliefs we have around the success of things, that they're set in stone. But actually, when you just start to interrogate your own thinking, a belief is only a thought that you keep thinking in terms of whatever it might well be. So are the beliefs that you have around your business positive or negative, or the society that you're living in? And you can work to change them very, very easily. Well, pretty easily anyway, once you recognise it. So recognising those beliefs are vitally important. They're pretty easy to change. And that's all from me. And yeah, there's no questions at the moment.
Yeah, fantastic. That's really great, David. I think the confidence to stand out, I think, is the resonant thing. I think in these situations when things get tough, have you got that confidence? How resilient are you? How strong is your belief to stick to your knitting? Because this is the difference, I think, between a resilient business or an unresilient business. And actually, if you get that right, and you find that actually having stuck to it, the business still doesn't sell enough product to make money, that at least you've given it your best shot, rather than getting diverted with everything that everything comes in your way. So that's really great. Thank you, David, for that. It's brilliant. So Tom, over to you, just to share your unenviable task of trying to summarize this discussion.
Yeah, I will summarize it in three bullet points, as a matter of fact, because I think most of it has been said or has been repeated. But what I really liked is the technology as an enabler, and not the mantra that we hear all the time, where technology is the answer, right? It's all technology, and technology helps us to save all the problems. No, it's an enabler. And for instance, in Hans's business, where you have drivers and you have customers in cars that book a private ride, in the end, it's the interaction between two individuals, two people. So yes, there might have been some technology to bring these two parties together, but in the end, it's a human interaction. It's that intimacy in the end that counts. And I thought it was quite good that the technology here is then used to better understand what is the perfect match, if you like, between a driver and a client in that particular case. So that's one, technology as an enabler. The other thing is building the relationships with virtually everybody, whether that is your customers, your suppliers, your team members, other stakeholders. I think it remains key that in business those relationships are developed and maintained. And last but not least, because this will be the topic for the next 2 weeks as well, is about pricing. Giving stuff away, whether the Pret example or any other example, if you like, because there are many, unfortunately. If you have a business model that you can only run because you give it for free or virtually for free, and otherwise consumers would walk away from it, then what is the reason to exist at all, right? So you have no reason, you have, there is not some sort of a right to exist. Like the jazz band, they have no right to play. If the crowd doesn't like their music, they better change their tune, or they get off the stage. So these are the three main elements that I picked up from this conversation today.
Yeah, that's really great, Tom. Thank you very much for that. I think I'd also like to congratulate you on using the word intimacy. For us blokes, it's an interesting challenge, but I think it's a good example of stepping out in courage, because I do agree that's absolutely essential to certainly the new now, or the emerging situation, and how to meet customers' requirements. Very much what you said, Hans, and you, David. So fantastic. I really appreciate your time, Hans. It's been very insightful. Thank you for that. You've provided some real clarity on the professionalism to run what is even a small business. And all respect to you, I've always had a lot of respect for small business owners. So well done. Good job. Thanks for your contribution.
Cheers. No, thank you very much for having me, guys. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah. Have a great day. Cheers.
Thank you. See you later.
Thank you.
Bye.
Cheers.
Cheers.